Here's a case where knowing how the SAT works, I think, makes our lives a lot easier. So first and foremost, we would look at question 29. We would see that it has no line reference. So we would look ahead to question 30 to see what's going on. And we, sure enough, have a paired question. So we're going to do these together, and hopefully, that makes it easier. The other thing I noticed, though, is that number 30 has this very wide range of line references. And that's unusual, okay? Now, I do know that the passage is supposed to follow the chronology rule, right? That the questions are generally in the order in which the answers appear in the passage. There is some variation here. Occasionally they break the rule. It's not a big deal when they do, but if I have, something to kind of guide me along, that's better than nothing. And so what I would do is I'd say, well, what are the surrounding questions? Well, this is the last question in the passage, so there's nothing to come after this. But the one before it said line 61. So technically, I'd expect my line reference for this one to be after 61. So honestly, that means D is really the only one. Now, C is close, so maybe I kind of incorporate that one as well. But I don't know, there's a clear line here between A and B and C and D. It doesn't mean I'm crossing out A and B automatically. It just means that if I am stuck on something and I have to kind of guess, my best guess is going to be D. It might not be right, but if I had to put money on it, that's the safer bet. And so with that in mind, I do go through this process, but, I think it helps and maybe nudges us in the right direction. What can reasonably be inferred, hate that word, about gliding animals from the passage? So inferred scares us because it means we're going to need to do a little bit of work here. The lines might not come out and say what we want them to say, but ideally it'll say something about gliding animals, and then we can worry about the inferred thing later. So let's look at these lines and see if we get anything here. So 4 to 6. That's right here. They jumped up like popcorn, he said, describing how they would flap their half-formed wings and take short hops into the air. So what does that do with gliding animals? I'm kind of just looking around the rest of this paragraph here, and I don't see anything, right? I see some birds, the ground birds. It's talking about birds. Doesn't say anything about gliding animals, so I didn't think that was going to be right, but sure enough, I don't have any evidence to think it's right anyway. 20 to 29, let's look at that. That's right here. They really only use the ground for feeding and traveling. So let's talk about ground. Who are they? Are they gliding animals? I'm looking back. This is why with evidence pairs occasionally we do want to read beyond the evidence lines that they give us. Sometimes there's a pronoun or something that's kind of clearly has been mentioned before, and we're continuing the conversation about it. So we might read back to just make sure we understand what was mentioned and what we're talking about. So right now, I'm looking to say, okay, who are they? What are they? That refers to something I'd like to know. Specifically, I want to know if it refers to gliding animals, and I just don't see it, right? I mean, we're still talking about ground birds, and I don't see anything here about them. So that doesn't seem right either. Let's look at C, 57 to 59. We're getting closer to where I expected the answer to be anyway. So that's here. The birds were doing the very same thing with their wings to help them scramble up otherwise impossible slopes. So again, we're talking about birds. Do I see them about gliding? No, it's still the birds. So I don't know, maybe, but it doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem like it's about the gliding. Hopefully 72 to 74 gives us something here. D. Is it just the parentheses part? Yeah, that's weird. But what do you know? Something gliding animals don't do, and thus a shortcoming of the tree down theory. So it's clearly talking about gliding animals. I don't know what the something is, right? So there's an unknown here that I need to figure out. And so this is another case where I'm going to read back. So what are we saying? In an evolutionary context, where it takes on surprising explanatory powers with one fell swoop, the dials came up with a viable origin for the flapping flight stroke of birds, something gliding animals don't do. So here's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to dumb summary this line. What don't they do? They don't flap. I don't know what that has to do with anything. But that seems to be all I got out of those lines, and so we're going to keep it simple. and we're going to let the choices in number 29 give us more information, help us understand the science. So letter A. The gliding animals young tend to hop along beside their parents instead of flying beside them. Wasn't have anything to do with flapping, so it doesn't seem good. It has to do with hopping. So I don't know, maybe that's similar? I don't know, maybe I'll leave it. It doesn't seem obviously right, but also doesn't really seem obviously wrong. B, their method of locomotion is similar to that of ground birds. Well, no. Similar, the whole point of that line reference, remember, is that they do not do it, right? So the flapping was the ground birds. That's what we were just talking about. That's the whole passage, right? So that's definitely wrong. It's not similar. It's making a contrast. C, they use the ground for feeding more often than for perching. I don't really remember this kind of thing coming up. It certainly wasn't in those lines. It doesn't seem right. D, they do not use a flapping stroke to aid in climbing slopes. I mean, look at that. Perfect. And that's why we keep it simple, right? Because very often our dumb summary of what's going on is actually like just enough for the answer. We are able to use just that to find the right answer. We don't need to go deeper and to understand the science. And so this is where people lose a lot of time on the SAT, is you guys think that everything needs to be understood. And so you read and you reread until you have a good sense of what's going on. Sometimes you never do, but you try and you waste a lot of time. And as it turns out, for the vast majority of the questions, the most basic understanding of the passage is all that you need. So keep it simple. Be dumb, okay? And then if the question needs a little extra, if you're down to two choices and they seem similar, then we can start to get a little smarter. Then we can think about the subtle things and the science, and the choices themselves will give us more specific stuff to care about. We don't need to come up with that stuff randomly. It's going to be given to us in the choices. So another reason to keep it dumb is we don't know what's going to matter until we've seen those choices. So keep it simple at the beginning, and then let the choices tell you how to be smart. Hopefully that helps, and hopefully that makes sense. But the chronology rule helped us here as well, and here's a great example of it working, and it will work for most of the test as well.